Like every other speaker, I'm very keen to show you keynote materials. I'm very keen to impress you in the hope that you'll book me for your conference and that I can do something significant for you at the conference. But I guess really I can't do that directly this morning, although I will go through a few slides because you expect speakers to do that in terms of where we are. I think the overall reason, though, that Paul wanted me to come to this event this morning, and I was very keen to be here for it, was to talk to you about thinking better business. And I want to talk specifically about the conferencing and eventing world in which you're involved, in which you plan, in which you deliver, put on and hold some incredible conferences. I've been privileged, like Graham, to work around the world. I've spoken in 44 countries at over 2,700 events. And like Graham, I'm getting a little tired of what happens. The same old, where literally every single room I walk into is darkened. Preachers stand in the front and dispense from the good book, which in the modern era is just known as death by PowerPoint. And really where it came from for me is that I wanted to go back and understand the conferencing industry. And as much as business, when the Industrial Revolution kicked off and we needed this concept of work and business and company, the only reference point back then, in about 1760, was the military. We've always fought each other throughout civilization. So it made a lot of sense that we understood the military. There was a general at the top. There were troops at the bottom. There were ranks in between. The word strategy was coined. Company is, in fact, a military term in its own right. So companies of men, strategies, tactics, war rooms. And we built to the Industrial Revolution on militaristic principles. And we still run many businesses like that today. So when we started having conferences, and now you've got to go back about 120, 130 years, when the first of these things that we all do and put on came into being, like looking for a reference point as the original business people were, the conference people had to go somewhere for a frame of reference. And I think what they chose to do at that stage was look at religion. Because every Sunday, in churches and mosques and synagogues around the world, people walk into darkened rooms. There's a raised deck at the other end. There's a podium not too dissimilar to this one. And as I say, they dispense and preach from the good book down to the minions below. When I began my speaking career some 15 years ago, I was often asked, "Are you a motivational speaker?" And I said, well, no, I talk about business. I talk about trends and change. I'm showing people about new ways to work. But is there any motivation in it? And I said, well, yeah, I guess so. I mean, it's a byproduct of what it is that I do. And still to this day, 15 years later, at airport lounges around the world, when people ask you what you do, they go, oh, a motivational speaker. No, I'm not. But that's what was expected when this industry kicked off. That's the basis of where USB came from, I guess, in its own fundamental origins. That people want a better speaker to come up onto the stage in the darkened room, and they used to say 15 years ago specifically, can you do the graveyard slot? And we all know what that means, because we all know the delegates are fast asleep after lunch, having been bored right through the morning and fed some appalling conference food during the middle of the day, and then they come back in and have a doze. I still get asked that question. Are you motivational? Can you speak in the graveyard slot? Thankfully, a little less now, because what we've seen around the world with my fellow speakers at USB, and this business was founded on speakers, by the way, Unique Speaker Bureau. It would bring together an offering of a very diverse offering, to Graham's point, of speakers from all around the world, the very best of what they could do in their profession, and they would bring it to you to build your overall conference. And that's why USB's been talking about this concept of BBC, building a better conference. Because many of us as speakers are tired of doing this, walking in, white-knuckling the lectern, dispensing stuff and walking out straight afterwards. And if it's the speakers who are bored and the professional speakers who are bored, it's got to be an indictment against our own industry. And what's incredible for me is that the audiences are even more bored. Every conference I go to, where do they sit when the doors open? The delegates sit in the back rows first. Because they know as soon as the lights go down, they're underneath that sign that says exit. And when it gets boring, they can sneak out for a WhatsApp chat, for a smoke break, to go off to the bathrooms or do whatever it is that they do. Nobody ever sits in the front row. Have you noticed that at conferences? And yet, if it were a concert where people are actually prepared to pay for the tickets, they fight to get to the front first. So clearly, there's a major difference between a concert that people want to go to and a conference. And all too often I see within organizations, the people who are attending the conference, the delegates who are there at great cost to you, at massive kind of overall levels of budget, they're there for the piss-up and a bit of a chance to catch up with their mates in a couple of days out of the office. I finished an event in Johannesburg yesterday at lunchtime. Nobody rushed back to work. They were just happy to be going home early. And that's what they talked about when they first arrived. It's only a day and a half. We get half a day off work. Now, our job as professional speakers is to change that dynamic. And yes, we can speak. We can stand here, bare our souls, bare our chests, deliver great research, astounding thoughts and theories, and we're better than your MD or your CEO because he or she's not a professional speaker, and that's why this industry actually began from a speaker perspective. Because if you put somebody on who's at least interesting, well, maybe they'll forget the CEO and the marketing director and the finance director were so bloody boring. I mean, have you ever had a brilliant financial director give you a financial presentation? There's no diversity in what they do. They throw up the charts and the graphs, and you'll understand them and you can see them. And here's an Excel spreadsheet as big as half a building, and it's still as boring as hell. But what do we do as speakers that can change that dynamic for you? What we're seeing around the world, what Vaughan mentioned a little earlier, the concept of fresh, an event industry that's going around the world, a global multi-hub meeting, just took place in Johannesburg, Basel, Copenhagen, London, and Philadelphia simultaneously. Rooms this size of event people just like yourselves gathered together to share best practice. And what we're seeing around the world, and are justifiably very proud of here in South Africa, was that we stole that multi-hub conference because we had better ideas than anybody else. In Britain, they're struggling with this. In Copenhagen, they're struggling with how to make the conference better, how to make it more meaningful, how to eliminate hours of dialogue and get into something like monologue. And what's extraordinary about that is that some of the best speakers in the world now, and I'm privileged to work in that very privileged group, are changing the dynamic of what we do. So I don't even want to show you the slides that I've got lined up for you here. I'm just going to leave that as it is, because we're thinking a little bit differently. And the real idea is we're coming off the stage. We can talk on the stage, as Graham said with his fantastic brand new keynote. And the reason I asked him the question about the workshop is what we call an intervention inside USB, where now we can get dialogue going, talking within and amongst you, the audience, grabbing your views. The cost of bringing people to an event these days is astronomical. And if all they want is a half day off at the end of a 1.5 day event, then surely it wasn't planned correctly in the first instance. We need to get people as excited about going to the event by changing the event as we possibly can. So many of our speakers now offer what we call these interventions. My own presentation, The Road Ahead, for example, brings up 3 traffic signals, talks about road signs, simplify, smarten up, and specialize. And there's a message within that that fits in with the overall theme of what the conference was designed to achieve. All of our speakers will personalize every single talk for you at that level as well. But then we ask the audience to sit and work in groups, diverse groups, to Graham's very valid point, asking them to put together their own thoughts. How does this company simplify things? How should it smarten things up? How should it become more specialist? Another question that we ask and work in an interactive workshop scenario, getting away from this main stage, is let's be CEO for the day. Just did it with Cell C the other day in Mauritius. Jose dos Santos, the CEO of Cell C, is a vibrant, very loud, very rude, very abrasive character. People are actually terrified of him. And I learned that in the original briefing session. So I changed one of my workshops for Mauritius to be, you're Jose for the day. And it gave people in a group, because nobody would criticize him publicly. And you can't walk in and go, what, do you think the CEO's wrong? You'd never put up your hand and go, yes, the CEO's an arsehole. It's corporate suicide, right? But if you were the CEO for the day, how would you run things differently? Work in your tables now. Let's work this for 15 minutes. Give us feedback. Let's bring you to the stage. Let's get your spokesperson for that group saying, our group thinks. Wow. The other thing we do is conference television, working with our partners Uzi Films, as well as we work with our partners Multimedia here from a staging perspective. Uzi Films outside run what we call CCTV, Conference and Congress Television, where we're now filming small little chunks, getting the keynote speakers. Even the financial director can be interesting for 3 minutes on camera once you prize them away from their spreadsheets. And we'll talk to them about what it is that they do. Because you know when you meet people, again, in an airport lounge, and say to somebody, what do you do? Boy, they can tell you about their company. There's no fear of public speaking there for the fact they're not standing in front of a crowd like I am this morning, and our speakers are with you today. So that everyone can have a conversation. And if we film them in a lounge setting, a Tonight Show studio, or a simple backdrop, which you'll notice just now in the tea break, just a simple backdrop, one light, one camera, two microphones, we'll capture and create a private YouTube channel for you. You can publicly put it out into the open space if you wish, or you can use it on your intranet or as a private YouTube viewing only for the delegates at the conference. Because that's the other thing that intrigues me. What happens when the conference is over? Normally what happens is the banners get lowered, the bar bill gets added up, there's a sharp intake of breath because, Jesus, did they really drink that much? And then everybody goes home. And even though you've had the motivational expert who told the ostriches they could fly to work, and on Friday afternoon, man, before that bar, they were, yes, I'm going to fly. Monday morning, they walk to work because they're ostriches. So there's no need for just straightforward motivational feel. There's an involvement that says, how do we engage you? How do we make your conference the start of the process, not the end of the process? If you're really launching a brand new initiative, a new company slogan, a new positioning statement, a new concept of change, new leadership, whatever it might be, why doesn't that live on in message after the conference? Why not use the guest speakers that you hire from USB to put video messaging together for you, which in a week's time you can send to the delegates to remind them of the key points? Why don't you have your guest speaker interview your CEO and roll out a CEO little video? Because everybody watches them on their smartphones, on their tablets, or on their desktops. Why don't we keep this concept alive? So from interventions to television to workshopping to doing things differently, an amazing brand new intervention that we could offer you. The timeline of your organization. And let's assume that we were all one company today and you wanted to talk about the history of your company and where you'd come from as well as where you're going. And thinking about Graham's point about diversity, this fits right into that profile. Just run a conference where we ran the timeline. Went back to 1983, 35 years ago. And what I did was give them the names of people who'd been at the company since 1983. And because you'd had 35 years service, as the speaker, I'm coming to you and going, you know what, Maria, you've been here 35 years. Do you remember your first job interview? Now, Maria has no idea that I'm going to be asking her a question. But we stand her up. We make her the hero. She tells a short story for a minute or two. You've worked there since 1987, ma'am. You've seen more change. You joined in 1994. Tell us your story. And all of a sudden, you're finding your audience is a lot more engaged and creating a really good mood swing in the room that says, wow, these are people just like me, and I'm learning stuff about the people in the room as well. So when it comes to using speakers, yes, please God, book us, because otherwise my wife will kill me and my kids will starve to death. But apart from that, let's think about using us differently. All of us at USB want to offer you something different. Personalized, worked to match your event, to suit your theme, to deliver the overall best level of conference that we possibly can, and then keep it running for you. And here's the good news. It doesn't cost much more, but the rewards are absolutely immense. Thinking, better conferencing. That's what I want you to challenge the USB people with. So if you do hire me, or Graham, or Alan, or any of our other speakers that will follow after our tea break, wow, use us, please, but use us to your best advantage. Let us bring you through USB our best expertise and literally help you build a better conference.